Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing another movie review, so hopefully you find this one interesting. This movie is a horror film from the USA. This is spoken in both the English and Spanish language with English subs, released in the year 2007, directed by Zev Berman, and this film is called Borderland. So Borderland is about a group of college friends. They've just been accepted in their respective colleges, and so before they go into the serious life, they're going to have a little bit of fun in order to celebrate. So they go to the border of USA and Mexico, and they're going to celebrate in Mexican culture. But unfortunately, the celebration quickly turns into horror when they realise they're being at the mercy of a drug cartel that specialise in human sacrifice. The leader of this cartel believes that if he spills human blood to the gods, he can gain the power of invisibility in order to traffic his drugs from Mexico to USA across the border. And so this is obviously psychotic, but the psychotic tendencies of this group are basically being thrust upon these college students, where they come to the realisation that they're going to have to band together and try and fight back if they are ever to make it back to where they belong. So whether or not they can is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Borderland. This was a fascinating experience, and it's an experience that I didn't think was as good as it really could have been, but it's still a very, very scary horror film. If you are a fan of extreme cinema, then this one is highly recommended, because I think a lot of people are going to really like the way that Zev Berman goes about his business. Now the reason why this movie is as scary as it is for two very specific reasons. Number one, it does depict drug cartel activity. Now when you see on the news, drug cartel, basically they do horrible things to each other. This is stuff that you can't believe one human being would do to another. And I believe that drug cartels are the closest thing to the boogeyman that you can get without going over the top into make-believe world. So these drug cartels absolutely terrify me, and this is something that really does plague Mexico. Mexico is such a beautiful country with such a rich culture and history, but unfortunately it's been plagued by violence, and it's these drug cartels that have no basic consideration for life. They have no compassion. Life is very, very cheap, and what they do is just absolutely terrifying. It's a real-life horror film. And not only that, what actually made Borderland even scarier was the fact that it was actually loosely based on Adolfo Costanzo. Now, Adolfo Costanzo was actually a guy who was into black magic. He was very influential as far as drug cartel activity is concerned, and he believed that he actually gained a lot more power from sacrificing innocent people. And unfortunately, on this story, he actually sacrificed a college student from the United States. And so this is something that absolutely shocked me. I thought, all right, well, human sacrifice dating back to the ancient days of the Aztecs. This is something they believe if they appease the gods, that they would actually gain a lot of luck and that they actually get ahead in their lives. But basically, coming into modern times, the fact that religion can have that mind control and how devastating religion can be if it's used in the wrong way, I think that is, again, a very terrifying element. And so Zev Berman does a great job at actually getting the monster under your bed to come out from under the bed and actually grip the viewer. And when the monster grips the viewer, I had the chills go down my spine. I had the hairs in the back of my neck stand up, because I couldn't disconnect myself from what was going on. I couldn't say that this belongs behind a TV screen, because this is actually something that happens. This is the execution methods were actually really used. And so because you've got that connection to reality, it just makes it really scary. It makes you feel very awkward, and you don't really have a safety barrier for the first 3/4 of this movie. And so because you don't have a safety barrier, you feel very vulnerable. And not a lot of horror films make me feel vulnerable. Not a lot of horror films make me feel as though I've got nowhere to turn, and so I'm spiraling down a very dark passage where it was just torture and murder and just pain and misery, and it was everything that is black in the human heart. This is a very sinister sort of film, and the sinister quality is not only magnified by the great cinematography that catches a very gothic-like atmosphere, but it was done through the very excessive sort of violence, but done in a way where the violence is held back to a point where the director also allows you to use your imagination. And because he's allowing you to use your imagination, you can't desensitize to what's actually going on, because not only is the violence few and far between, but it's not as graphic as a lot of other films are. And I think this is a masterstroke from Zev Berman, because you're never quite sure as to what is actually going on, and because your mind is playing games on you, all of a sudden, as I said, the vulnerability is forever present in the first 3/4 of this movie, and I think that it was one of the scariest experiences that I've had in quite a long time. And so it's that monster in the back of your head that if you don't see it on the news, or if you can disconnect yourself from it, you can pretend it's not there, but it's always there. It's always lingering in the background, and this could have actually been me or you. You're basically in the wrong place at the wrong time. This college student who actually really lost his life to Adolfo Costanzo and his cult, this could have been me or you, and that makes it terrifying. As I said, this is not a vampire film. It's not a werewolf film, this is actually a film that it could happen, and it's basically showing you what one human can do to another human and the power of that controlling aspect of religion. And so I thought, yeah, basically the culture of Mexico, as far as Aztecs are concerned, was very interesting as well, as far as human sacrifice and appeasing the gods. I thought that was a very interesting element that just combines into a whirlwind of violence and suffering that I think everything that a horror film really needs. So I thought the acting, the villains in the film were very, very scary. I really like the fact that there's a lot of Spanish language in the film, so it gives it that realism and it actually gives it respect to the actual Mexican culture that the movie is depicting. And you've also got some fairly decent performances from the college students, although they're fairly stereotypical. I didn't like what they were going through. No, I wouldn't even wish that upon my worst enemies. And so when they're going through this torture and pain, I wanted them to escape. And that was basically the sheer brutality of the film molds these very irritating characters into someone that you can actually hope they actually escape with their lives. You got Ryder Strong, who was more famously known of his role of a very well-known TV show called Boy Meets World. He's also in Eli Roth's original Cabin Fever. I like him as an actor. He doesn't have too much to play with here, but he goes through the most torment in this movie, and there's something that happens to him that I was gobsmacked at how dark it actually got. So that's something I really liked as well. And it's just the whole mood. It actually feels like a genuine horror film, and that's something that really needs to be applauded. But unfortunately, the movie is not a masterpiece that I really wanted it to be, for the simple fact that there is a strong element of this movie that is formulaic. Is that this is a very generic way of telling its horror set pieces. Is that when it goes to the scary stuff, all of a sudden I felt as though I was watching Hostel from Eli Roth. Now, Hostel was about a guy who goes missing, then they go look for him, and then they find themselves in strife. And this is exactly how Borderland plays out. One of them goes missing, and they go to investigate, and then all of a sudden, shit hits the fan. And so that's something I didn't really like, is because, yes, you've got that sort of vulnerability of, this has actually really happened, but unfortunately, the generic sort of storytelling that the movie depicts in the last quarter of the movie gives you that slight disconnection. It gives you that safety barrier because you've seen it before, and all of a sudden it's turning into a movie. And so that's something I thought that Zev Berman could have steered away from. Maybe he could have actually stayed a little bit truer to the story that it was actually depicting and taken less creative liberties. I thought it would have made it a lot more scarier, and it would have actually kept you grounded in that strong, realistic sort of boogeyman quality that the movie has. And so by the end of the film, I was slightly checking out. I wasn't totally checking out. It doesn't derail the experience. It's still a very good horror film, but I just thought it could have been a lot better if it actually prevented itself from going down those stereotypical methods, because all of a sudden you can get that slight disconnection, and that slight disconnection allows that safety barrier to come through and really save the viewer. So, yeah, this is a movie that I think every horror fan really needs to see, especially if you're a fan of extreme horror, and the fact that you can't disconnect yourself completely from the fact that this has really happened makes it even scarier. And so I'm so glad I watched it, and as a result of that, I'm going to give Borderland 3.5 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.